has a bad COVID outbreak now. And one person has died so far. 2 people have been sent out to higher care facilities. And so far, almost all of the COVID is contained in one wing of the building, which is the memory support wing. It's a lot harder to keep people in memory support 6 feet apart from each other and wearing masks at all times because of their level of dementia. So infection control is very difficult. We have one resident on my side, on the assisted living side, who is positive for COVID, and she feels right as rain. She feels fine, thank the Lord. Still things to be thankful for. So as tired as I am, and I wasn't really inclined to video, I figure that now it's probably one of the most interesting months of my life, and so I might as well vlog a little bit. So I just, let's see, it's 3:06 p.m. I just rushed from my work to the nearest FedEx box to drop off about 100 COVID tests that were performed today by a combination of myself and our local health department on all staff and all residents. And I will specify that more now. If you're not interested, then skip to this number I'm putting right here. Okay, so with COVID, at least in Oregon, when you're positive, and there's no need to retest you. After 10 days from your positive diagnosis, once you have 3 days of no symptoms, including 24 hours with no fever, while not taking Tylenol or anything to decrease your fever, at that point you are declared cured of that particular outbreak, immune to that outbreak rather, and that you can then mingle among the people freely, wearing your mask and staying 6 feet away from people. The outbreaks are estimated to be 6 to 8 weeks at a time, 6 to 8 weeks long total. And we're on about the end of week 2 now. So every single week we have to retest everybody who tested negative. Once you test positive, you are no longer tested again during that outbreak. It's the rules that I just mentioned, where you wait your 10 days after being diagnosed positive, etc., etc. But you're not retested after that. You're not retested to make sure that you're negative, that you've gotten over it. So we had a lot of people test positive 2 weeks ago. We had a few more people test positive last week. And this week, if everybody is negative, then that's week 1 of all negatives. Once we have 2 weeks in a row of all negatives, then we don't have to keep doing weekly testing. So, since we have had some staff out by either being positive or having symptoms or being around someone who's positive or with symptoms, that cut our staff roughly in by a third. And some of the third were people who are, most of the third are people who are typically full-time and are rocks. And so not having them has been a huge strain on the whole operation. And a lot of us who have stayed negative, we're pulling doubles, we're working a lot of shifts that we don't usually work. I have been pulling doubles or 12s. So I think everyone knows that doubles are 16-hour shifts. Either doubles or 12s quite a few times in these last 2 weeks. Last night I stayed up until 2:30 in the morning preparing COVID tests, and then I got to work at 7 in the morning to administer some tests to our night shift. And then the health department came in and they actually did all of my residents, and I did all of the staff, and then I did all of the paperwork for everybody. And the paperwork, honestly, is what takes way longer than the actual poke up the nose. Poke up the nose took like an hour and a half to do around 70 people. But the paperwork, so the filling out the requisitions and the consent forms and getting copies of the insurance cards, and for the residents making face sheets that have their address and social and all that kind of thing. That takes, for stinking ever, it takes like 10 hours every week. I don't know how, but it does. There's many little steps which are all simple in themselves, but they're very time consuming. My Starbucks is here. We have had a few deaths, and we haven't even had time to mourn. Usually we work with the elderly, so normally we're able to process each person's death with some time and with acknowledgement, some kind of a little service, or being able to take the time to write a card to the family or attend their funeral. And we have not had time to grieve the people that we have lost to this virus. And families are frustrated, just like we're frustrated, because their frustration is that they don't feel like they're getting enough communication. Of course, if I were sitting at home and my mom was in an assisted living that had an outbreak, of course I would want a call every day. Your mom's okay, your mom's okay, your mom's okay. But we are prioritizing, those same people wouldn't want to know that their mom had not eaten lunch or had fallen on the floor because the nurse or the caregiver who was supposed to be watching them was on the phone calling families to update them on how everyone was doing. The preventing the fall and feeding the person and keeping them clean and hydrating them come before picking up the phone and sitting on your tush and delivering communication, as important as communication is. But when you don't have an extra person who can just sit and do that, you just have to prioritize. Just like if you were in an ER, an emergency room, you have to do what's most important first, and actually physically taking care of these people is what is most important, even more important than reassuring the family that their parent is doing well, or even sometimes, informing the family that their parent is the same as they were yesterday. No worse and no improvement and no worse. We prioritize communication as well. So of course, if someone is getting worse, then we tell the family about that and keep them in the loop. But this is not a scenario where one person is sick, that like it normally is. Normally, you have one or two people who are not doing well at a time, and you have much more time to communicate to the family about what's going on, and to reassure the family, or to, give them the hard truth, or attend to the family's needs in addition to just the needs of the resident. But this is not one of those scenarios. This is where you have multiple people who you have to have eyes on at all times. And if your eyes are on the right spot, if you are looking at that person, those many people who are needing different things from you throughout the whole day and the whole night, you may not, in your 16-hour shift, have time to call a family member. And it's so hard for the family to understand that. It really is so hard for them to understand that. And I know I can understand from their perspective. But when you're working on the floor, you understand. Most healthcare workers understand. There's most of us during a normal work day don't have time to take our 10 or 15 minute break and only take our lunch because the state forces us to, or else our employers get in trouble, or are working overtime, or don't have time to go to the bathroom, and don't have time to hydrate, and don't even have time to run and get a glass of water, much less drink it. That is typical for healthcare. That's typical. And now add to that, you have multiple people who have a significant, serious virus which attacks the people that you're caring for. And you have less staff than normal because that same virus has attacked the staff as well, even the young staff. And we have a young staff member who is not doing well. I'll just say it that way. When you add all that to the picture, there is actually no time to sit down and make phone calls. When families have called me because they have my personal work cell phone, I call them or text them back as I am running up and down the stairs, as I'm even in a different resident's apartment, which is, typically I wouldn't do that because it's kind of rude, but I have to multitask big time right now. It's so hard for families to understand, and I think healthcare is one of the hardest jobs there is in many ways, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. And to have so many families who their emotions depend on us, and to have so many residents who their physical, emotional, and mental well-being are all wrapped up in the care that we give them. Because this isn't a clinic or a hospital, which they have a ton of their own problems right now. This is assisted living, where this is their home. They live here. We are their family. We feed them all their meals. We deal with their emotional crises, or their times when they're down, or their existential questions about, why am I alive at 95 years old when I don't want to be? Or conversely, I hate the fact that I can't do the stuff that I could do when I was young, because in my mind I feel like I'm young, but my body is not young. Their routines are structured around us. Our routines are structured around them. And being here is not an option. Well, kind of. If the family wants to take their person home, that's an option, but it's not an easy option for most people. But like a clinic is an option. You can go to a clinic or you cannot go to a clinic, depending on how bad your infected toe is. A hospital sometimes is an option, sometimes is not an option. But here, they actually live here. This is actually their home. And it happens to be where their health care is also provided. The other challenge is that assisted livings are not staffed in general for skilled needs. There are staff present to deal with skilled needs, like me and the other nurse here. But typically in assisted livings, it's expected that the residents who live in assisted living are quote unquote stable and predictable. That is the state's standard for who is supposed to live in assisted living, is someone who is stable and predictable. If they're not stable and predictable, assisted living is not considered to be the right place for them to live. Well, now we have a virus that attacks assisted living environments because that's where elderly live. And we're not staffed to be a skilled nursing center. We're staffed to be an assisted living facility. And that makes it all the harder when suddenly an assisted living facility with way more resident ratio to staff ratio than a nursing home suddenly has to take on the demands of a nursing home and subtract some of the staff that's already the lower ratio compared to nursing homes, subtract some of the assisted living staff even more from that because they have COVID or were exposed to COVID or have symptoms. It has been a very hard 2 weeks, and all of us are doing a wonderful job of doing our very, very best to be caring and loving and observant and careful and compliant with all the rules and obsessive about cleaning a pen after someone touches it with their hands. The little stuff is what I mean. You have to, suddenly this virus that hadn't touched our building for 6 months ravaged us. And something that we thought we were going to make it through without anyone getting sick or dying. Suddenly, that invisible enemy went right into our building, and now our world has changed. And more importantly, our residents' lives have either temporarily or permanently changed, as well as their families. And that is what this virus does. And we are the brave little soldiers who are fighting it as best as we can. It's creeping into our dreams and nightmares. It's creeping into our ability to sleep. our ability to eat. We are all in this business because we love the people that we take care of, and it is a privilege. And for me, there is still a feeling of disbelief. It's all happening, and I know it's happening. But the stages of grief, you have denial. And some of us are coming up on the anger stage: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Those are the stages. We are beginning to grieve. We're starting to get out of the shock days where it all feels like it's not real. And as that dust settles and the dust of reality starts to flicker in, I'm not looking forward to that. But all that we're doing right now is one day at a time and 1 minute at a time, one task at a time, and moving one foot in front of the other. And the fact is that most of us, even though we are COVID negative and we are testing COVID negative week after week, we feel sick because either we're working 24-hour shifts or weird shifts like evening and then morning, or 12s and 16s, or the anxiety and grief hitting our systems, and in combination with wearing masks all day long. I don't know if it makes the air drier, but all of us are just, like, you can hear my voice is a little bit scratchy. My throat hurts, and I have allergies typically anyway. I'd say it's slightly more than normal. I've had joint aches, but I've been on my feet, working long shifts on my feet that I'm not used to. I've had to pick up other people's types of jobs, so I'm the nurse, but other people typically pass meds, and I've had to pull quite a few shifts of passing meds, which is fine. It's just that it's not my routine, so I'm not as swift at it as those who've done that particular job for years. A lot of us are, we had one lady who worked overnight and then she forgot to eat, and she had too much sugar when she finally did eat, and then she got sick. She yerped, and because she yerped, the state said that she can't work until she gets a negative COVID test and 24 hours without symptoms. And some of the clinics around here are starting to slow down their ease of testing. You can't just go there and get tested. Now you have to be a patient of theirs or something like that. So she's been out for a few nights, and then that means that other people who are already doing their own shifts have to pick up that person's shift if she's still out when she's scheduled to be in. And that kind of thing is happening all the time. My point being that people are working themselves to sickness. They're working themselves to sickness. So not working themselves to COVID, although their immune systems are getting taxed. It's a joke, because You're supposed to not come to work if you feel any symptoms at all. Are we just supposed to let our residents feed themselves and give themselves medications that they typically can't handle doing, and bandage their own wounds and transfer themselves when typically they need help just because we're all being worked to the floor? Our company has been told by the state, with good reason, that we can't have staff back if they meet certain criteria until they go through their quarantine time. And it's for the safety of the building so that we don't spread COVID more than we have it. It makes sense. But it's mandated. It's required of us. It's required of our company. So that leaves us who don't have COVID to be strung thin, to pick up the jobs, the tasks, the chores of the people who are not allowed to come into the building. And some of it is getting delayed and some of it is getting dropped. Like every week I check on all of my skin issues and make a progress note. I haven't done that for 2 weeks. I've gone to the serious skin issues and tended to them, but I haven't had time to check on all the yeast infections and, see how smelly they are. And I haven't had time to fax the doctors on small issues, but the things they still matter to the residents. I've had one guy nagging me for toenails this last week. He wants me to cut his toenails. I have a stack of new orders, which I review after the staff have reviewed them. I do the last check, and it's a stack that I have not gotten to in 2 weeks because I have been a med passer. And I've been fielding 1,000 calls from 1,000 different directions for 1,000 different needs. I have to be there to rebound the ball back. It's like other people are passing me the ball and I have to pass it back to keep it moving. I can't ignore the ball that's being passed to me for the things that are critical in this day. You can't say no. You can't say no to when someone passes you the ball and you have to respond to it. If someone in a sick zone is asking for Jell-O and juice, you can't say no. If suddenly, because our staff are divided into sections, we need new vital signs equipment, you have to get on that. You have to do it. There are priorities. But what I have seen, which I have not experienced before because I've not ever been in a war zone or anything like that, and maybe this is more typical there, but people are so nice to each other. I think that we all know that we're all hurting, and we know that we're hurting ourselves, so we know that they must be hurting also. So we're all being very nice to each other. Not that we aren't typically, but there's so many thank yous that are happening. Everyone is expressing thanks and being gentle, being gracious, being patient. And there's been times of impatience and frustration and anger that has happened. There has been quite a few tears that all of us, I think all of us have cried in these last 2 weeks. And we're We're being so gentle with each other's souls. We are trying to tend to the wounds that have been inflicted upon us by this virus and what it's done to people that we've loved. We're tending to our heart wounds by little strokes of love. And it carries us through the days. And the residents also are, some of them are frustrated with all of this, and some of them are grateful that we care so much to work the long hours, and that we're running up and down the halls, and that we're restocking all the PPE bins, and that we're asking how they're doing, and we're taking everyone's temperatures, and we're making it all still function. The clock is still ticking. Everyone is still getting their basic needs met. Everyone is still eating. Everyone is still clean. Everyone wakes up in the morning and gets dressed and gets PJs on at night and goes to bed. And everyone still knows that we care about them. And they see, at least some of them see, how hard we're working to make that happen and to prevent any other people from getting COVID. I've had a few people come up to me, including residents, who went out of their way. Like, they weren't just passing me in the halls, but they actually came to find me to tell me thank you for the fact that they see me here at work practically all day and all night. And they know that I'm doing it for them, themselves, and for all the residents. And it really means a lot when that resident told me, for example, thank you for, she said, I see you here all the time. Aren't you tired? Don't you ever want to go home? I want to thank you, really. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing, that you're here, and that you're taking such good care of us. That's really special. So this outbreak is supposed to last until, at the latest, November 21st, which is 8 weeks since it began. And I look very forward to when this outbreak is over and things go back to the way they were pre-outbreak. Not pre-COVID, because that's going to be a long time, but pre-outbreak. But we're all going to be a little bit changed by this outbreak, because our sense of security is altered. We thought that by wearing masks and screening staff and educating everyone about staying away from crowds and all of the stuff, and wiping down surfaces and removing extra chairs to prevent people from sitting 6 feet close to each other, and being very careful about visitors, and doing the required COVID testing, we thought that it wouldn't come into the building. And it didn't for a long time. We'll never really know the actual source of it because many people got sick at the same time. But after this outbreak, I think we're all going to be, I didn't want to use the term PTSD because I think that PTSD is to be honored is a weird way to say it, but I don't want to just throw a term like that at it, but let's just say at least a portion of that kind of a thing. It could be official PTSD. I mean, that's possible. It is very stressful, but at least some bit of that same idea where every time that somebody wants to sleep in a little bit extra one day, we're going to wonder if they have COVID. Because our strain of COVID that we got in our building does not affect the breathing at all. Well, towards the very end, the oxygen saturation does go into the 80s, low 80s, but that happens with the dying process anyway, even without COVID. For our residents, they get tired, very tired. They have diarrhea. They don't want to eat or drink. And they want to sleep. And they sleep and they don't eat until they pass away. So in the future, whenever anyone sleeps until noon, I think a little part of us is going to freak out and wonder if they have COVID. Or anytime someone has diarrhea because they ate something that they kept in their fridge for too long. But if we don't know why, we're going to think COVID. Maybe that's for the better. Maybe we should remain scared. Maybe it's appropriate to be afraid of the little things now. But be thankful for the good things. Anyone out there who has been affected by COVID or not, the good things get you through. We are being thankful for the good things. We're being thankful for every day that goes by that someone doesn't die. Being thankful for every day that goes by that we don't have a new COVID diagnosis, either a resident or staff. We're so thankful. We have cried when a staff member is able to come back to work from quarantine because we needed them so badly to come back. It was so hard without them. And we're happy to see their faces. We're our work family. The first time I cried with all of this was last Thursday when we did our weekly testing, and every single resident and staff member on the assisted living side was negative, including a few people who I was a little concerned about because they had some elevated temperatures. I cried just barely and held it together in relief when we got the negative results. And the second time I cried was when I was talking with a coworker about how I was grateful that at least with this strain of COVID that, like I said, people are not struggling for breath at the end of their life, because that is the thing that I was the most worried about when COVID first started, and we heard on the news about how big of a deal it was going to be, that I did not want to see any of my residents struggling to breathe at the end of their life. And that hasn't happened. It's funny, I've said it so many times now, it's not even bringing up emotion. It used to be every time I talked about that I would cry. I even did a few days ago, but now I'm just getting so used to saying it. But I'm thankful for that. That is a silver lining. Even if people have to die in our situation, they are dying peacefully in their sleep. That's something to be thankful for. I'm thankful for all the small things. Blue skies. We had terrible smoke here for a week or two, and it was just like a cosmic joke that our building was plagued with this virus, and you go outside and you can't even see 100 feet in front of you, and you can't even take off your mask to breathe outside. It was just like a nightmare. But now, currently, our skies are clear and blue, although I hear the smoke's gonna come back here pretty soon. And by the way, I look flushed, but it's because I'm sitting in a warm car. I don't have a fever. My windows are up because I don't want to hear people talking. I don't want people to hear me talking about this. Although I'm going to put it on YouTube, so that's silly to say, but anyway. My family hasn't hardly seen me, but they're very proud of me. And I think the same probably goes for most other staff's families, is that they haven't seen them, but they're proud of them. We had quite a few staff quit when COVID hit the building. And that's okay. I understand. I could never quit, though. In the midst of all of this, I couldn't abandon my people. I've thought a few times about the weight of all of this, and I'm not alone, so I'm not worried about saying this on social media, because I know that a lot of people in my position
Isn't that lovely?
That's lovely. Flowers make everything okay. Flowers make everything good. Yeah.
And the house with so many flowers is ridiculous.
Oh, nice. Yes, flowers make everything lovely. So, I just came back in the car from being at work for, I don't know, an hour since the last clip, cleaning up I don't need this anymore, cleaning up the COVID station. And I just, when we leave the, not apartment, not room, the building, words, we sanitize our PPE from the day, and so I grabbed my fabric mask from my purse to get the 15 feet from the sanitizing room to outside the exit. So some rules are, there's one entrance and one exit. There's a screening at the entrance. There's a sanitizing of PPE at the exit. Surgical masks are only good for 1-day use and then they have to be thrown away. N95s can be used up to 5 times and then thrown away, but the 5 times have to be 5 days apart. So you have to do, I could wear my N95 today and then sanitize it at the end of the day. And then 5 days later, I could use it again, etc., etc. So in 25 days, I would have to throw it away, and you keep track of that by you sanitize your N95 with 70% alcohol solution, put it in a paper bag and date the paper bag, and then keep track of when 5 days is. And then your eye protection, like your face shield, can be reused as many times as you want to until it falls apart, and you sanitize that with a 70% alcohol solution at the end of every day as well.